Good evening. Welcome to Exploring Bay Area School Options. My name is Erin Gevertz of Erin Gevertz Consulting, and I'm so glad you decided to join us tonight to learn about what amazing options you have here in the Bay Area and around the country if you're considering high school, and how we might be able to work together. Thanks for being here. Here's a little bit about what we'll be talking about tonight. So talking about different types of schools that are out there, what to consider when researching, what schools are considering as they're looking at your applications, and the services that I offer. Before we get started, this topic, thinking about applying for schools, especially as we're still in this pandemic, often brings up a lot of anxiety. And so I believe it's very important for students and parents and guardians alike, and myself, to get centered before we get going. So I'm going to invite you to try this box breathing. So in a moment, I'll invite you to breathe in for 4. And hold for 4. And exhale for 4. And then hold. And again. So box breathing actually helps to calm down your central nervous system. It's an easy thing we can do when we're feeling a little bit of anxiety or stress. All right, so I think it's fun to show a picture of me when I was the student's age and they were applying. That was me at my bat mitzvah, but I am a Bay Area native. I grew up in Foster City. And I have 12 years of experience in middle and high school placement. I've placed hundreds of students into middle and high schools all around the Bay Area and throughout California with boarding schools. And my passion with this work really began with educational access organizations and has continued on into where we are now. My mission with this work is to help students and families feel more confident in their application process, providing individualized support based on the needs of the family and the child. My tailored approach allows students to get exactly the help they need to thrive throughout the process. So many of the schools, here's many of the schools I have placed students into over the last 12 years. On the left are high schools, and on the right are middle schools, all throughout the Bay Area and throughout California. So before we dive into this, I think it's important to clarify the different types of schools that are out there. So the first type is public school. I grew up going to public school, big advocate of public schools. Public schools, it's in your local school district. Oftentimes you're assigned to a school based on where you live. There are also charter schools. Charter schools are free schools, and they are smaller than many public schools, and they use a lottery system to do their admissions, right? So there is a very short application, and they use a lottery system to make it fair for everybody. There are also parochial schools, who are tuition-based schools, so no longer free. They are affiliated with the archdiocese, so hence the parochial, and they are outside of the school district, which means that they get to create their own curriculum that they ensure meets the state standards. In addition, under the private school umbrella, alongside parochial schools, are independent schools. So independent schools, there's 2 types. There's day schools, which are also tuition-based outside of the school district, where your child goes to school during the day and then comes home at night. And then there are boarding schools, and boarding schools would be where your child goes and lives at the school either 5 or 7 days a week, depending on how far that school is from your house. outside of the school district as well, and often smaller than public schools. So if we decide to work together, or if you've met me before, you've definitely heard my placement philosophy, which is to keep an open mind. This process, there's so much to learn about yourself as a student, as a parent, as a learner, what you think you enjoy, what kinds of opportunities and options are out there in these amazing schools that we live in here in the Bay Area, near where we live in the Bay Area. And while you might have heard something great or not so great about a school from a cousin or a friend, or even your memory as a student going there, who knows how many years ago, I strongly encourage you to keep an open mind as you go through this process, because you never know what you might like or how schools might have grown since then, what might be right for you. So as you begin to research schools, these are some of the factors that I strongly encourage you to consider. So there are some basic ones, right? Size of the school, location of the school, classes the schools offer. I think it's important to consider what the schedule is like. Some schools have block style classes where maybe kids have 3 classes a day, 2 hours each. That might be interesting for you. Some schools have what I would call a more traditional schedule with a 50 or 60-minute class. Is that something that matters? What is the mission of the school? Do their values align with your families or with yours as a student? What kinds of student life opportunities are there for you to get involved with? What are the facilities like? Do you need academic learning supports or social-emotional learning supports? Are those available for you? And most importantly, are the questions. So as you're researching online and watching YouTube videos and getting to know the schools, you should start to have some questions. And it's very important that you get your questions answered, whether from admissions teams or faculty at the school or from the students themselves. I'm often asked, what are schools looking for in a student? And here's a little pyramid that we put together to help explain that. So at the top, we have an interview. So there will be some point during this process, whether in person or virtually, where your student will meet with an admissions team. It might be individually in an interview, it might be in a group activity session, but something where they get to know somebody from the school and make a positive impression. So that's one very important piece. In the middle, we have the academic profile, also important. So, how was the student's grades, any standardized test scores that you've submitted, teacher recommendations, which are huge, from different teachers and administrators in the school. There's 3 of them that their school received to hear what the students like on, in the classroom, on campus. Over here on the right, we have interests. So interests are also important. Schools are small, private schools are small. They want students who are going to get involved on their campus, whether it's music, theater, dance, sports, clubs, journalism, newspaper, robotics, knitting, working in the library, whatever it might be that your student is interested in exploring or continuing or trying new. Schools want kids who are passionate about learning new things, about trying new things, about getting involved. So expressing those interests throughout your application and throughout the process is very important. And finally, this one over here used to only say test scores, but as test scores are becoming optional, I think that test scores, based on my experience last year with students, I think the test scores have been replaced by student skills, right? So what's a student bringing to the school, but also the student's passion for the school itself. Schools want to know, why does Jenny want to come to my school? Not just because we're small, not just because her brother goes there. right? That's not a great reason. But specifically, is there a program that you're interested in? Is there a circus that you want to try? Is there a class that you attended that seemed just super interesting and the teacher really caught your attention and that's the learning style that you think that you have? What is it specifically about the school that you resonate with that you think would make it a good match for you? So standardized testing, as I mentioned, is becoming either optional or blind. There are schools that are test blind where even if you send them a score, they will not consider it. There are other schools that are optional, which means that if you send them your SSAT or ISEE scores, they might consider it. I have a whole video on standardized testing that you can watch at my YouTube page. So check that out or message me if you have questions, more questions about that. I do recommend that you take a standardized test. I think it's a good skill to have in your pocket. And who knows, you might get a great score that could help to elevate your application. And if you don't get a great score, you don't have to send it in, right? But at least it's an option for you. Parochial schools do use the HSPT, and that will be required this year. Again, last year it was virtual. This year they've said that they are going to require it again. So do plan to take HSPT if you're applying to parochial schools. And the Lowell test is something that they haven't decided if it's happening if you live in San Francisco yet. So, make sure to continue checking with SFUSD about that. All right. So between now and April 20, if you're applying to private schools, the process begins now. You should be creating your school list, doing research, doing test prep. If we just start to work together, I'm going to be reading through your documents, helping you to solidify your school list. And throughout the fall and early winter, you'll be visiting schools, completing applications, taking standardized testing, working on those teacher recommendations, getting the transcripts from your school, submitting those applications, and then ultimately receiving the decisions from the school in early spring. It sounds like a lot. It is a good amount of work, but I have found that all the things that students learn about themselves and learn about the schools, often make this process worth it, especially when hopefully they're getting into a school that they're interested in. So what I offer is flexible placement support. I offer educational advising, which looks like getting to know your child, suggesting schools that you should consider, helping with planning and guidance and timelines. I offer school application supports. I do not write the applications for you, but I will give some advice on essay topics, on ways of phrasing things that might help to make things more clear to admissions teams, helping with student supplements, which many schools have. And then I also offer mock interview practice. So if you think you've got it and you just want some help with a mock interview, that's certainly something I can help with as well. So if you decide to start working with me, here's what it will look like. So the begins with an inquiry call, a 30-minute call with the parents and guardians to get an idea of what you're looking for, so I can learn a little bit more about your family, to see if I'm the right match for you, and to identify what our next steps will be to get started. After that, you would submit your paperwork to me. There is, some disclosure forms enabling me to get access to grades and transcripts. Any other information that you think would be helpful. I send you a list and you send me those documents. And from there, we have our first meeting, a 60 to 90-minute meeting for the whole family to get to know your family, start to get to know your student, talk about any learning or psych challenges that they may have, and ultimately begin to build a relationship. From there, I take all of that cumulative information, including all the documents you've sent, and start to develop a school list. I think this is one of the most exciting parts of this process, is just creating a pretty lengthy list of schools that your family will start to consider. With all of my knowledge in the schools, having placed hundreds of kids, I have seen kids go in and thrive places. So we're going to start off with a lengthy list. Students may or may not apply to all those schools in the end, but I think there's something about keeping that open mind and really taking a look at what's out there. After the list has been solidified, I help students with their applications, navigating choosing essay topics. I'm able to connect families with financial aid support and resources if that's important. Helping to look at student statements, providing feedback for mock interviews, more and more through the process. And then ultimately, this last piece that's so important is the advocacy with admissions teams. So after working with your family throughout the process, I'm able to provide insights to the admissions teams to help to fill in any gaps or questions that they might have about you and advocate for your family. So the way that my business works is I offer a 10-hour package to receive my guidance through the process. And your family can choose to use those 10 hours however you see fit. That first meeting is a requirement because I need to start to get to know you and I need you to send me those documents. And beyond that, last year I had students scheduling meetings with me one-on-one where we'd review things or brainstorm essay topics, where we would talk about schools and help to develop questions that they might ask during a mock interview, or just to ask in general when they're going to different virtual events, talking about application strategies, making sure things are getting in on time, and that final advocacy piece, which is so, so important. So I am here to guide you through this process. If what I've shared this when you're watching this video sounds interesting to you, I strongly encourage you to schedule a free 30-minute call to share more about what you're seeking. You can do so on my website, and I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you so much for attending this event this evening. This work, I was reconnecting with some of the students who I worked with last year, and as they're getting excited to start 9th grade, and hearing about some of the fun things that schools are planning. And, I just love this work. I just love this work. There's something very special about supporting students through a challenging process, helping to relieve stress from parents and guardians. Sounds nice. And really putting my expertise to good use and helping kids get into where they want to go. So if you have any questions, I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day or night. Thanks so much.